In this video, we will be looking at the weighted average cost method of valuing our inventory. So before we jump into all the different cost methods, I'm going to do a separate video for each of them. I do just want to point out that under GAAP, companies are not required to use a specific inventory valuation method. They can actually use whichever one they want, and that it doesn't need to accurately reflect economic reality. So what that means is that um, even if the true flow of costs for their goods reflects FIFO, they can still elect LIFO as their method. Okay. So with the average cost method, a company allocates the cost of goods available for sale based on the weighted average unit cost incurred. So this assumes that all goods are similar in nature, and so it would probably be most applicable to companies that sell relatively uniform goods. It's the easiest method of accounting, and it minimizes potential for manipulation. But it differs under the perpetual and the periodic methods. So under the periodic method, we calculate cost of goods sold at the end of the period. And so we take the weighted average cost of all of our inventory that's available for sale during the period. So our beginning inventory plus all of our purchases, and then calculate our weighted average cost, looking at those all together. And so we only have to calculate one weighted average cost for our total inventory for the period. Under the perpetual inventory method, we have to recalculate the average cost of our inventory after we make each purchase. So you'll see that that will cause a difference in our cost of goods sold and our ending inventory values. So here we have an example problem that we're going to go over in all three videos. So the video where I go over FIFO, LIFO, and average cost, and then we'll be filling in our answers under each of these three methods. So we'll be calculating ending inventory and cost of goods sold under each of these. So before we jump into the weighted average cost explanation, I do just want to point out a few things for you that I also recommend doing. It just makes setting up problems a lot easier. So if we look over here, we have our purchases right here. So we start with a balance of 600 at the beginning of April, and then we make 5 sets of purchases during the period. And this 5,300 represents our total units available for sale during the period. So total units, AFS stands for available for sale. And then if we multiply out the number of units times their unit price, and then add all of that up, we will get a total cost of our goods available for sale of 33,655. So this is our cost of goods available for sale. Okay. Then these over here are our total sales. So we sold a total of 4,600 units during the period, and our goal with this is to calculate what the value of our cost of goods sold and our ending inventory is. We could also calculate our ending inventory at this point by taking our units available for sale. So we had 5,300 total units available for sale. If we subtract the number of units sold, so 4,600, we will arrive at our units in ending inventory. So here we have 700 units in our ending inventory. So it's helpful to start out all of these problems with this calculation because you can go back to it. You don't have to recalculate every time you do a different method. So let's jump into our first example. So first we're going to start with the average cost, and we're going to do this under the periodic method. So under the periodic method, we only calculate cost of goods sold at the end of the period. So when we're calculating the weighted average cost of our inventory, we're going to wait until the end of the period, and we're going to look at our cost of goods available for sale as a whole. So to calculate our weighted average cost per unit, we're going to take the total value of our total cost of total cost of goods available for sale, and we're going to divide that by the number of units available for sale at the end of the period. So for here, we have a total cost of goods available for sale of 33,655, which we calculated before. And then we have total units available for sale of 5,300. So if we take 33,655 and divide it by 35 or 5,300, we'll get a weighted average cost equal to $6.35 per unit. So to calculate ending inventory, we calculated before that we have 700 units in our ending inventory. We'll multiply that by our weighted average cost of $6.35 per unit. And we'll arrive at an ending inventory value of 4,445. Then we'll calculate our cost of goods sold. So we sold 4,600 units. If we value those units at $6.35, so our weighted average cost, we'll arrive at a cost of goods sold of 29,210. Okay. And then a quick check for us is to add up our ending inventory plus our cost of goods sold. So if we add these two up, we'll get 33,655. And our ending inventory plus our cost of goods sold. So ending inventory plus cost of goods sold is equal to 33,655, which should equal our cost of goods available for sale, which is also equal to our beginning inventory plus our purchases. So if you think back to early on in the chapter, we went through this calculation before we set this up. So we take our beginning inventory, we add in any purchases. Those two added together give us our cost of goods available for sale. Then we subtract our ending inventory to arrive at our cost of goods sold. So this is a great check for you in these problems to make sure that you've done everything correctly. So here we can go ahead and fill those in on our table. So our average cost, our ending inventory was 4,445, and then our cost of goods sold was 29,210. Okay, so next I'm going to illustrate how we do our cost of goods sold and ending inventory valuations based on the average cost method, but under the perpetual system. So under the perpetual system, the company constantly updates their inventory for purchases and sales throughout the period. So when we're doing the weighted average cost, we need to calculate the moving average. So every time that we make a purchase or a sale, we're going to recalculate the value of our inventory. So this one requires a bit more work. So I recommend doing this as systematically as you can to avoid making mistakes, so working slowly. So I like to start out first. I like to use different colors. So when I'm recording a purchase, I'm going to use green, and then I like to record any reductions of our inventory, so any sales in a different color. So on April 1st, we purchased 600 units at $6 each, which gave us a total inventory value of 3,600. Then I also like to kind of mark through as we go so I don't forget anything. On April 3rd, we sold 500 units at $100. So here we're going to reduce our inventory by 500 units. This is a sales price. So this we don't really care about right now because we're just focused on cost of goods sold and ending inventory. We're not focused on recording our sales revenue. So here we have, sorry, this should say 6. 500 units. And then we are going to look at the average cost of what we have available. So at this point, we just have our beginning inventory. So we know that these 500 units are going to be sold at $600. I also like to put things in parentheses so I can, or sorry, $6. So I can remember that I'm subtracting them. And if we take 500 times $6, we should get 3,000. And so if we recalculate our inventory after this sale, we'll have 100 units at a value of $600. So that equates to $6 per unit. Okay, then we have 2 additional purchases. So we have a purchase on the 4th and then a purchase on the 8th. So let's go ahead and add those to our inventory balance. So on the 4th, we purchased 1,500 units at $6.08. And so the total value of that purchase was 9,120. Then on the 8th, we purchased 800 units at $6.40 each for a total cost of $5,120. And then our next transaction is a sale, but before we record that sale, we need to recalculate our weighted average cost. And so if we take our total number of units that we have 100 units remaining after our first sale. We add 1,500 for the purchase on April 4th and add another 800 for the purchase on April 8th. We have a total of 2,400 units in our inventory at this time. And if we add up the total cost of those units, we'll have a total cost of 14,840. If we divide 14,840 by 2,400 units, we'll have an average cost per unit of $6.18. It's always good to do a quick, what I call reasonableness check. So anytime that we calculate a weighted average, the weighted average that we calculate should fall somewhere between the lowest and the highest value. So this 6.18 is higher than our lowest amount that we purchased of 6. And then it's lower than this $6.40. So that seems at least reasonable to me. So next we have our sale of inventory on the 9th. So we sold 1,400 units. So here we're going to reduce our balance by 1,400. The cost of these units will be $6.18 for a total cost of goods sold of $8,657. So you'll notice here too, I'm just rounding to the nearest dollar, just to make things a little bit easier on us. That's fine if you guys do that too. And then we don't have an additional purchase next. Instead, we have another sale. So we don't need to recalculate our weighted average cost because we haven't added any more purchases. So this hasn't changed. So our sale on the 11th, we sold 600 units. That'll also be at $6.18 for a total cost of $3,710. So after this sale, we will have inventory of 2,400 minus 1,400 minus 600. So we'll have 400 units in our inventory with an average cost of $6.18. And then a total cost of $2,473. Okay, so our next transaction, we can see that we have an additional 2 purchases before our next sale. So we're going to add both of these sets of purchases into our inventory account before we recalculate our weighted average cost. So we have a purchase on the 13th of 1,200 units at $6.50. So our total price for this purchase was $7,800. Then on the 21st, we purchased 700 units at 600 or $6.60 for a total cost of 4,620. And then we can see that our next transaction is a sale. So before we record the cost of goods sold for that sale, we need to recalculate our weighted average. So after these 2 purchases, we have a total number or total units in our inventory of 2,300. The total cost of our inventory is 14,893. If we take 14,893 and divide that by 2,300 units, we'll have an average cost of $6.48. So again, we can do a reasonableness check. We see our lowest cost of our inventory was $6.18, and then our highest was $6.60. $6.48 falls in between, so that seems reasonable to me. So then our next sale is 1,200 units on the 23rd. And then we can see that we also have another sale of 27 units, or on the 27th of 900 units before we make another purchase. So both of these sales will have a weighted average cost at the same price, so we don't need to recalculate anything in between. So on the 23rd, we're going to subtract 1,200 units at $6.48 for a total cost of goods sold for that sale of 7,770. On the 27th, we sold 900 units at $6.48 for a total cost of goods sold of 5,828. So after we make those 2 sales, we have a remaining inventory of 200 units valued at $6.48 with a total cost of 1,295. Then our last transaction related to inventory in this period is an additional purchase of 500 units on the 29th. So here we'll add 500 units at $6.79 for a total purchase price of 3,395. And so our ending inventory is going to consist of 700 units. Our total cost of our ending inventory is 4,690. If we take that cost of our ending inventory, divide it by the number of units in ending inventory, we'll arrive at our weighted average cost for our ending inventory, and that's $6.70. So to check, we can add up and to calculate all of our cost of goods sold, we can add up all of our cost of goods sold amounts. So here, our cost of goods sold was 3,000. We had 8,657, 3,710, and these 2 sales down here. So if we go ahead and add up all 5 of these cost of goods sold for these 5 different sales. Just give me 1 second. I forgot to add this up ahead of time. We get 28,965. And so see, 28,965. As our cost of goods sold. If we add that to our ending inventory that we calculated, so 4,690 ending inventory, we should arrive at our cost of goods available for sale. So if we add those two together, we'll get 33,655, which matches what we calculated before. So we can go ahead and fill these in on our table here. So our ending inventory was 4,690, and then our cost of goods sold was 28,965. So that'll be it for this video. I'll do FIFO and LIFO in another one just to make watching these back easier. So I'll see you in a second.